Hello, everyone. This is Sanad Karkar, CEO and founder of Zero Code, the ultimate Web3 launchpad designed for creative minds. This podcast is part of our academy, which aims to demystify the latest technological trends from blockchain to artificial intelligence. We will interview builders, entrepreneurs, scientists, hackers, lawyers, and everything in between. On this first episode, I am thrilled to talk to Dr. Khalid Saqer, the founder of Knowdyn DeScience Fund. Khalid is a well-respected scientist and researcher in computational fluid dynamics with over 70 peer-reviewed papers. His research focuses on investigating fluid turbulence and its implication in energy systems, the environment, and lately, the physiology of human circulation. Khalid is a visiting professor at Tohoku University, Japan, mentor at Newchip Accelerator, board member and associate editor of Frontiers in Mechanical Engineering and Fluids journal, reviewer and panel member of Egypt Science and Technology Development Fund. Over the years, his fascination with turbulence as a natural phenomena and as a theory of nonlinear dynamics has matured into a practical and vested interest in scenario planning, cryptography, and decentralization. As a Minskian, he believes that machine intelligence true promise can only be fulfilled through augmented intelligence, human in the loop, which requires proactive human participation that can be quickly rewarded with valuable digital assets as proposed through the DeScience movement, which he is a part of. Currently, Khalid is heading Ph.D. in Knowdyn with an incredible group of visionaries who are united under the umbrella of bringing a better future for science and the world as a whole. I hope that you enjoy this podcast, and if you do, please make sure to subscribe so we can keep creating great content like this. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you with me here on the first podcast that I'm hosting. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a bit about your background, just to let the audience know. Who is Khalid?
Khalid is he's a scientist. I was born and raised in Alexandria, Egypt. I was born 1982, so I'm 41 years this year. I've lived my entire life in Egypt until probably 24 years old. I moved to Malaysia. I did master's and Ph.D. in UTM, one of the big engineering and technology universities in Malaysia. And then that was by the Arab Spring. I was getting my Ph.D. in 2011. So it was a very difficult time for all my generation, not only for me. So I went back to Egypt. I moved back to Egypt in the wakes of the Arab Spring, on holding many hopes and many dreams and getting aspirations and stuff to play a bigger role in my country's future. And then I got a 10-year job here in Egypt, and then I moved to Japan in 2017 as a visiting professor with Tohoku University. My research is around computational fluid dynamics. It's a very unique engineering discipline because it's quite transdisciplinary. It combines calculus, math, differential equations, and numerical analysis and computational methods and computing, a lot of computing, CPU-rich computing problems. So I basically work in biomedical applications since 2017. Basically, I study vascular disease using computer simulations. This is basically what I do. So I do computer models for stroke, for brain aneurysm, for genetic diseases like moya disease, even for neurodegenerative diseases. So because it's all controlled by physics and fluid dynamics and blood dynamics. So this is my research. This is one of Khalid's sides. This is the mainstream side, I would say. So there is the technology crazy guy, because at a certain point in my career, I had quite a very interesting experiences with artificial intelligence in some projects. So I started building this vision that I have about the future of science and the relation with machines.
So there's a lot here to unpack. So let's start first with what is it?
Computational fluid dynamics. Computational fluid dynamics.
Computational fluid dynamics.
Dynamics, yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
so,
yes.
so that's mainly applied in the medical fields, and obviously you've been in, Tohoku University, and you've worked in a lot of research. So, how do you go about funding your research? I mean, you work for a university, you have a tenureship. Obviously, that comes with certain facilities. But what is your usual process like to?
Okay. So in my field, there are two main tracks. There are the people who are developing the CFD technology as a computing technology, and there are the people who are developing the applications of this technology in automotive, in aerospace, in military applications, in biomedicine, in everything, because it's basically the majority of matter in our planet is fluid. So I'm working in this track. I'm working with applications. So when you work with applications, you get to have the opportunity to apply for so many schemes and grants. Because basically, if I'm part of a team who is studying the effect of climate change on the microclimate in a certain place, and I'm doing just the simulation, but I get access to this funding pool. So my research is actually being funded by government grants from Egypt, from Japan. I had one from Malaysia. I had one from the UK. And these government grants, sometimes they come from something like the ERC, the European Research Council, or the Newton Foundation in the UK, for example, or sometimes it comes through a university.
Mm.
So when I started working in the medical field, I also got access to the private funding, like companies. And at this point, where I had the first encounter between science and business, science and money, science and funding, what are they paying for? Are they paying to advance science, or are they paying to get regulatory approval? Are they paying to get regulatory approval, or are they paying to lower the indirect cost? So I got to understand a totally different role of science that I had in my virgin frame of knowledge that I had as a doctoral candidate, and then as a postdoc, and then as a junior researcher.
Okay. So the complexity of the system, it's not as I think it's not as clear cut as you think. As you said, it's not for the furthest of science. I mean, they fund science for an end, and the end usually is beneficial to them. I mean, that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the reality of all the hot scientific disciplines in the world. Actually, disciplines get hot because of the private funding money, not because of the government grants. Because the government grants can only meet like 50% or 60% of the demand. So basically, if you're working in Germany or if you're working in the UK and you have a company that is funding your research, you become the #1 professor in your department automatically, because you get access to real funding, people who are willing to pay more to get the results faster. Governments are not those people. Governments, they tell you the project has to take like 24 to 36 months, while actually now you can do it in 6 months, in 5 months. But they won't allow the expenditure plan has to be between 24 to 36. Why? Because they have a whole lot of issues about insurance of this funding and budgeting and so many things. They don't want to pay a lot of money in short time. They want to pay a lot of money in long time.
Okay. Yeah. And so do you have incentives to do so, or is it just purely due to the regulatory process and the bureaucracy of getting approvals and of course, like, the fact checking of researchers, making sure they're qualified, that their hypothesis stands? Yeah,
this is usually done by institutions. It's not by due diligence in academia is usually done by institutions, and this is why institutions matter. People in the DeSci space, in the DeSci movement, they always talk about how to bring down institutions, how to decentralize. We don't need institutions. No, actually, we need institutions. Institutions are very important in science because they are fact-checking, and they do the due diligence, and they make sure that there is no fraud or there is no scam. Are they efficient? Not really. Can we make them better? Yes.
It will be good to understand one thing, though, just to bring the audience into the sphere that you operate in, because to us, to a lot of people, I'm in entrepreneurship. So for me, this is really a foreign land. So let's get some things into perspective. Who are the institutions when you reference institutions?
The institutions are the universities and research institutions and non-profit research organizations or educational institutions.
Okay, and educational institutions can be both private and public. It doesn't matter.
Yes, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So these are the institutions who are basically like the guardians of funding.
They get to say who can apply to the grant.
Okay.
Who is eligible to apply to the grant.
So that's like the first kind of like check you have to go through.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
All right.
And then if you qualify, you get to apply to the funding body, the funding agency, which could be public or private.
All right. And this is when we come to things, for example, in Europe, here we have the Horizon
2020. The Horizon is a program by the ERC, the European Research Council. So the ERC is like the largest umbrella for funding science in the European Union.
Okay. And do you know how much they fund annually? Do you have idea on the figures?
I do have the numbers, but I've always had a problem. I had a little bit of Asperger's syndrome when I was a kid, so I have problem with memorizing numbers. So I have all the numbers. I will send you all the numbers with all the references. I know that Horizon Europe is funding basic science at least 50% less than what China is doing through 27, through the next 5 years. Yeah. So I know only the problems. But I'm not keeping track of, because they do a lot of raises. They do a lot of tiers for the funding. So I think now they have something around 70 billion euro.
Wow.
Around that number.
70 billion euros. And this goes typically to what kind of projects?
To scientific projects in universities.
That's it. Yes. So they don't expand to like entrepreneurs in this space. They're mainly focused in research and development.
There is definitely a channel from this space to the business space, because all universities now, they have incubators, they have venture builders, they have startup factories, they have all the kind of names that you can think about, knowledge transfer and commercialization offices. They have, here in Egypt, we call them TICO. So technology and innovation commercialization offices. So these are the kind of channels that researchers can go for the next stage when they get the funding. But this funding is for academic research, scholarly research, to advance science.
So here, while you're explaining it, I looked it up a little bit so we can explore it together.
Yes, please.
So the Horizon 2020 structure here, it says, for excellent science, 24 billion euros has been set aside. This includes European Research Council, Future and Emerging Technologies. And I guess these are some names of projects they have, because they have here the Maria, Skodabaski,
initiatives. These are initiatives. These are the actions and initiatives that they spend the money through. But check Horizon Europe. Europe.
Yeah, so this is it. So this is the Horizon 2020 European Commission.
So if you check the ERC website, you will find the specific numbers about how much are they dedicating for basic research, for translational research.
Yes. So this is what you were mentioning here. So I'm looking around and I can see here you have industrial leadership at $17 billion. You have societal challenges in health, food, energy, transport, climate, etc. at $29 billion or euros. And then you have, spreading excellence, science for society, GRC, EIT, and Euratom. And each of them have a few $1 billion scattered here and there. So it's a mega fund, really, when we talk about it, even on any VC standard. This is an enormous fund. So what are the challenges? What is the current obstacles in research in Europe? Because I went through your white paper, obviously, before we started this interview, and I saw the disparities that you have compared between the Western and European world today when it comes to funding academia and research versus, let's say, China, where they're actually in decline in comparison. So can you tell us a bit about that and the challenges faced here, and how is it being done differently elsewhere?
Well, actually, the disparity is very clear when we look at basic research. Basic research is the kind of research that advances knowledge, that disrupts the status quo of science. So this class of research, which is the most important, this is the DNA of science, has been in decline for the last 30 to 40 years. There are many studies that show the decline of disruptive basic research in science. So that is why the world is not getting better. Everybody can see that. So nations and countries are taking different stands based on this question, whether are we having the right things? Are we advancing knowledge in the right direction or not? So China chooses to advance applications, chooses to advance technology. And they are spending massive amount of money, like hundreds of billions of dollars, to advance technology. But in the same time, they are increasing their spending in basic research. So this means that they will close the cycle very soon, because when you have very advanced technology, you can actually use this technology to accelerate basic research. While in Europe, the situation is quite different. Europe is caring or is strategizing its stance from the current state of science on the societal and I call it the soft motive or the soft position. The soft position means that we are spending money to make sure that nothing goes wrong.
Mm.
So we are spending money to make sure that nothing goes wrong. If we can make something better, yeah, we can do it, but the most important is that nothing goes wrong. So that's why you will find a lot of grants granted and given to teams who are studying regulatory frameworks and studying adoption techniques and how to promote technology and how to democratize technology and how to bring technology from one space to another to make things more resilient to threats, to challenges. So in my thinking, 30 to 50 years from now, all the technology that will be used in Europe will be owned by Chinese companies.
Wow.
Now, it's only manufactured by Chinese companies, but the IP still is held by European or multinational companies. I think this is changing, and I think China is doing that in a very subtle and a very smart way, because I'm also in contact with the 1,000 Talent Program. So the 1,000 Talent Program, they recruit 1,000 scientists every year to China, and they focus on basic research scientists now for the last 2 or 3 years. Before, they were focused on technology. So they want to close the cycle. They want to reverse the cycle. They want to make the technological research work for basic research, because basically they can't.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that's actually mind-blowing to see that, we understand that a lot of things are manufactured in China. There's a lot of processes happening in China, but we know that the IP is at least protected somewhat. There's a lot of IP theft. We're not going to get into that. But still, for the most part.
Yesterday, just a small story. Yesterday, one of my students, who is now former student, he's now doing Ph.D. in an Ivy League university in the US. He's working on a new morphing wing for aircrafts. So morphing wings are the new wings of the future. They can morph their shape to reduce the fuel consumption by massive amounts, like 50% reduction in fuel consumption. So they morph. So he's working on something like that. And he said, let's meet and do a patent search together. We're just doing a patent search. We found out that there are like 38 patents. 22 of them are Chinese.
Yeah.
For the morphing wings.
For the morphing wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they're catching
it's
up with their
crazy.
IP game. So they're
It's
catching up with their
crazy.
IP game.
Yeah,
That's for sure,
Yeah.
right? But I think still, even though they're catching up, I've been listening to a lot of experts in the field, and they still indicate that while they're catching up, they're miles behind. For example, the U.S. The U.S. holds the largest number of patents, period, when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to software specifically, and different areas. But of course, there's no doubt China's catching up. We get that. But what are they doing that is different? You mentioned basic research plans, right?
Yeah.
And basic research plans are, as you said, like the foundation of scientific discovery.
Yes.
So what are BRPs, right? That's what they're usually called.
BRPs, or basic research plan, is a proposition, is a hypothesis, is a piece of information that tells a story about something that can be disrupted in basic research. It's usually when you write a basic research grant application, you get to write some parts to prove that you are at the edge of science, at the edge of your field. Like you do a literature review, you discuss all the related research that has been done before you, stuff like that. But this is not actually as important as it seems to be. What is more important is the argument itself, is the scientific idea itself. Because usually, if you have something like this, you have to have it backed with some measurements, with some simulations, with some evidence. You have to have some evidence. So BRPs, in my definition, it's the piece of evidence and the plan to disrupt a scientific field.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I were to put that into entrepreneurship perspective, then it's essentially your product market fit. It's an idea with a product market fit. You've built a very light MVP, I guess. It could be a survey of some sort, something just to prove that there is a need for whatever that solution is.
Yeah, I would say it's a problem solution fit.
A problem solution fit. Okay. Instead of the product market fit here, you have the problem solution fit. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Amazing.
Yeah.
And that basically, then obviously, having a lot of these being funded, and then you're either, I assume it applies the same principles. Post funding, 9 out of 10 will probably not amount to anything great, but then you have that one unicorn idea.
It depends. I have contributed and participated in over than, I think the last number I saw was 13 funded grants in Tohoku University with the Institute of Fluid Science. I've been working closely with grants of different sizes as a team member, as a principal investigator, as a co-PI, co-principal investigator at different capacities. So competition varies a lot. Like, let's say you're applying for an equivalent of $1 million grant in Japan. The competition here is 12-1. So out of each 12 applications, they accept one.
Wow.
If you're applying for $3 million, that's a 17-1.
17-1.
Yeah.
Wow.
So smart professors apply for a large number of smaller amount grants because they require less evidence. But it's very dangerous because they spend the money and the results are not really worth it. That's why we reach to a number like what you said, like 9 out of 10 dropouts. Because the 9 out of 10 usually they are the small ones. They are 9 because they are so many.
Okay.
Because big ones are really competitive.
Yeah, to get to the big leagues, like everything else, you have to have the best team, best results, best track record as well.
Yeah, I mean, in drug-related grants, in medical devices, to get like a 3 million in Japan, you have to have at least animal models, animal trials. So you have to have in vitro, you have to have in silico as well, like simulation, and you need to have at least animal model.
Wow. So you actually have to pretty much have earlier backers or investors in your IP idea for you to get to that level in order for you, or
no, smart professors, they get small, as I said, they build something big out of many small, but the risk is very high. So they get one grant to develop the experimental platform with the guys in engineering, and they get one grant to develop the animal models with the guys of veterinary, and they get another model, and then they think that to build something big out of this, and this is the smart way. That's why I always call them the smart professors, but the risk is very high. It's very high. And this is another point that is wasting talent in science, you know?
It's incredible. Like, so I never thought of like the scientific field being so competitive in this sense, but also to see that there's a real hustle. Like, you got these scientists who are like planning how to fund their dreams, basically.
It's the reverse of the venture capital world, because in the venture capital world, the small tickets have the smaller risk. Yeah. But in science, they have the biggest risk.
Yeah, I would argue both have similar risks, right? Small tickets or big tickets. It's hard to predict, like, unless you're looking at really the value, right? Like when you have good traction, business traction, you have like, good moat that protects the business, sustainable,
let me give you a real life example from my life, from my story. So I was doing my PhD with a grant from another project. So I was studying the turbulence in a combustion chamber of a micro jet engine, and I'm being funded by a project that is developing pulse detonation engines. So in the morning, I work in the experimental lab as a RA, research assistant, in the PDE project, pulse detonation engine project. And after 5, I go home, I rest for 1 or 2 hours, and then I go back to the lab, to the second story, and I work in my PhD until midnight.
Oh, wow.
So in the 5th semester, I was about to finish. I got all the simulations done. I was doing my experiments. And then my boss, my supervisor, he said, we need to finish the project. The deadline is coming. And I said, I have to write my thesis. He said, okay, so if you don't do the project, I have to get somebody else to do it, because I got fund for that. So I said, so how am I going to pay me? He said, I don't have to pay you. If you don't work for this project, you're on your own.
You're on your own.
So I just quitted the project, and I worked as a freelancer with a couple of companies as a CFD engineer, a freelance CFD engineer, to support the last semester, and I got my PhD. But this tells you that if this guy had a channel to raise a little bit of funding, at that time I was paid in Malaysia. I was paid like $1,000 a month, which is nothing as a PhD candidate. I made money by working as a freelancer for many companies, but this was what the university is paying, because they are paying for the tuition. So if this guy had a channel to fund me for the 6 months, I would have done a better PhD and a better project, because he got somebody else who was not really involved. He was with us, but he was not really hands-on the experimental rig. The experimental rig was producing Mach number 7 times faster than the speed of sound.
Wow.
So it was massive. The noise was massive, So he did really, the project is very poor, and the project failed, and he couldn't raise the next round.
Oh, wow.
Just because he couldn't fund the PhD student. This is just an example. I had this in my life as a professor with students. I was forced to do, and then I understood why he did that, because you have to do it, And this is academia.
Yeah. Wow. This really puts things into perspective. I never imagined it to be this way, but now that you mention it, this is explain why scientists are running to solve male pattern baldness versus curing cancer, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's commercial and demand, right? Like,
I need that. So let's put that aside. I will soon need it.
So, but it's incredible. It's incredible to see how commercial it is, and so. How can it change with decentralization? You've mentioned DeScience. Let's run through what is decentralized science and what does that field entail? And then let's a little bit of a deep dive into learning more about your specific project, DeScience Fund.
Absolutely. So in the beginning, we have to understand that some of the big problems in science comes from the fact that there is no immutable ledger in science. There is no big record. There is no one to keep all the records. So what records do we have? Let's take, for example, the record of academic papers that are being published every year. You have about 2 million papers published every year in all sorts of scientific fields. There is no one universal database that is immutable and accessible by everybody for this. There are big companies and big players who developed their own archives and their own proprietary platforms to keep their records. But there's no one records for humanity, just for publication. So this is a problem of keeping records. The second problem is with intellectual property. It's a mess. It's a big mess because you can find, there are thousands of IP lawsuits are being filed everywhere in the world every year. It's a big waste of money, a big waste of talent. It destroys many people's careers. So this is also a problem of keeping records and making sure that who owns what. Time-stamping problem. It's a time-stamping problem, basically. Because patenting, you get a priority date, and that's it. And there are problems that are related to funding, which are huge and which we have been talking about since we started this recording. So the problem is with funding is there is a lot of private capital owned by intellectual people and people who know how to make decisions and how to promote good change for the good and wellness of human being, but they just don't have the proper channel to access scientists who are in desperate need for a faster and quicker and more efficient way of funding.
So we've learned about how, institutions usually are the regulators, they're the guardians of what BRP goes to get funded from the different initiatives that are existing, whether they're government or private. So how would DeScience Fund, the specific project you're working on, to decentralize science funding, work? How does it benefit the researcher, the buyer of the collection, and then ultimately you as the DeScience Fund group?
Well, actually, it will benefit the researcher by giving them access to a fundraising instrument that is very flexible, that is will give them the liquidity that they want, and it will give them the kind of support that they want in a much less time than they get from public grants and from government funding programs. So NFTs, if when researchers be able to mint their basic research plans or BRPs into an NFT and then sell it on a marketplace, once it's sold, they get to follow a certain plan to convert the money that they got, or to spend the money that they got to do the research, and then they have to file some sort of reports and build the knowledge that they are building on the blockchain. And that's how the buyer gets the benefit, because they get share in this intellectual property. So people will be able to invest and support scientific missions that they believe in. So they will be able to sponsor new drugs, better healthcare systems, better transportation systems, better energy projects. People will be able to spend to invest money on the things that they believe that these are the future. This is the future.
Wow. I mean, what a way as well to break the traditional cycle, because suddenly, if let's say I'm inflicted by a rare disease and it's affecting 30,000 people around the world only, the 30,000 of us can find a researcher who's trying to find a solution and fund him.
Absolutely.
Or her, obviously.
Well, actually, this way or the other way, that means an investor wants someone to do the research for them, is another use case scenario for DeScience Fund. It will not be executed at the beginning. It will come later on when we have the security token offering.
Okay.
So people will be able, like what you said, someone who wants some scientist to do a research for them, a specific research for them, will be able to offer their tokens, to stake their tokens for this project if they pass a specific eligibility criteria or a specific vetting procedure.
Wow.
So the vetting procedure again will be done by the guardians.
So you can basically, your guardianship system then will enable you setting up milestones for them to get their tokens released to them, and they have to show proof of work for them to get rewarded as well. So there's a guarantee, like an escrow almost, between the investors and the researchers.
Yeah. In stage one, the platform will be driven by the selling side, by the scientists. In stage two, the platform will be more driven by the buying side.
Okay. So it's like based on the demands of buyers. And these buyers could be anything. They could be legal persons like you and me, but they could be institutions. They could be whatever.
Of course. Anyone who has a wallet.
And what do they get in return? So I'm as an investor, I would get IP rights maybe?
You get IP rights for existing knowledge and future knowledge.
Wow. Okay. So you're indefinitely embedded in whatever research endeavor that comes out of it.
You become part of the team. Same scientist who is doing the research, but you have a different share in the IP.
Like an angel investor almost. Like I'm an angel for research funding.
Because the notion of angel investor in the business world is a little bit different here. Because, as you said, it could be an institution. It could be a drug company who wants to buy in a big project done by another company. So it could be anything, basically. So the whole idea is to give the buying side the proper instrument and the proper platform that they can use to stimulate the selling side of taking their bids. So this is best done by a fungible token. While I think if you want the selling side to lead, it's done by the non-fungible token.
Okay, so non-fungible because you're offering something and it's already been predetermined.
Exactly.
And then the other side for the fungible token is you're offering tokens for whoever's going to take up the challenge.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. This is my design.
This is your design. And then at the first stage, you're going to have something called guardians. Can you tell us a bit about the guardians? Who are the guardians?
Okay, so usually the funds, the academic funds, they have panels and committees, and the committees have subcommittees, and the subcommittees have sub-subcommittees. So it's a very hierarchical and stratified and class-based organization. So you have the big professors from the big universities who are very old and have like 5 or 6 assistants who are helping them with everything. And then you have the associate professors or young principal investigators who are hassling things with 1 or 2 postdocs. And then you have the youngsters, people who just finished their PhDs, postdocs, they got tenured. So the panels always take from the top. So people who decide where and when to spend money on science, they are usually the senior people, the senior professors in terms of career achievements, which is accompanied by age, so in terms of age, and in terms of academic discipline. I want to change that. I don't like that. Because I think visionary people exist in so many different spaces, in art, in finance, in music, in commercial brands, and in so many things. So I want to build the guardians in a way, or I want to give people the instrument to build the guardian, because I'm not going to build it, but I want to build it in a way that is that makes the success of this platform an assured thing. So guardians are visionary people mainly, who have some significant achievements in their life and who can describe something about the future that correlates with other guardians, that other guardians think it's important. So to become a guardian, you have to be voted in.
And the initial guardians, then, these are handpicked professors, PhDs, researchers from notable backgrounds, peer-reviewed researchers. That's the initial base you're going to start with.
To be honest, the initial base is based on people who believe in the Marvin Minsky vision of artificial intelligence. People who believe that humans and machines should work together, not replace one another. So I think this is the basic condition. So if there is like a super scientist with a Nobel Prize, but he believes that machines should replace people, I don't think he will fit for the mission of the Science Fund. So I would prefer someone who is a postdoc, a young researcher, a powerful researcher with a vision about the future, who thinks that genomic sequencing can be turned into a video game for 8 years old kids. Yeah.
Right. But these people then, are still hold the necessary qualifications.
Absolutely.
They have to hold to judge a PRP
this
that is coming.
This is a legal prerequisite for a science fund to work. Absolutely.
But that's the difference. They don't have to be the most decorated scientist in the field. They just have to be a scientist. They have the credentials, but have the vision.
I always like to talk about the Disney movie Tomorrowland, at this kind of questions, because in Tomorrowland, people who have a vision for the future, they created a place in a quantum dimension that cannot be perceived unless you have a token to pass to this place. So this is actually where I got the idea. So the people who built Tomorrowland in the Disney movie were visionary individuals who have really energetic consciousness when it comes to science. They don't need to be like decorated and awarded and have a lot of certificates. They just need to be validated scientists, like bulletproof scientists, and they need to have a vision, which is more important than that. They need to have something about the future that stands out, and they need to believe that machines and humans should work together, not replace one another.
Wow. Okay. Now I get the vision and I understand the revolution of it, right? You are really like flipping the table, saying, hey guys, you old decorated guys sitting in your offices, you are, as relevant as someone who is passionate and younger and has really like an innovative way of thinking.
Absolutely. And I want to create the tool and instrument to make this relevance a reality.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. And so how would people reach out to you to be part of this Guardian journey?
Okay. So Guardians, I started to talk with my own colleagues and friends from all over the world, from Japan, from the US, about the idea. They said they like it. They need to understand more about the joint IP ownership agreement. Actually, I did some survey. I did a Google form, a very basic thing, just to understand what are the barriers to entry, what are the barriers to technology adoption. So the main two barriers when it comes to people embracing the platform and become part of it as guardians or as researchers or as investors is that they need to see and read the joint IP ownership agreement, which is about to be ready for them to read. The second thing is that they are asking about the pricing. So they are asking about the pricing of the token, how much it's going to be. So I'm still doing a lot of scenario planning for this, but most probably it will have an average price based on the price that is coming from different projects. So basically, every scientist will be able to mint their PRP into an NFT and set a price for it, or for them, if there are many. And then when the stage 2 comes in and the fungible token comes in, the fungible token will be based on the growth in this pool. So it will take an average price from the Genesis pool, which will keep growing, because at the end it will be a place where everything is kept. The other one, the fungible token, will only function as a value storage for the marketplace. So the price will be based on this, but it's difficult to explain to them when you don't have a Genesis collection, when you don't have this. So I've shifted a little bit. You know how it is working with a startup? You always change and you always adapt and evolve and morph.
You have to.
Talking again about morphing. So I've slowed down a little bit in hiring guardians until I have the POC, the functioning POC. And I'm also planning to to build the first BRP with my research group, with my EV Bio research group. So we will launch the first project on the platform for raising money to model the brain circulation, to build the world's largest model of brain circulation. And we have scientists from Turkey, from Italy, from Sweden. We have Maria, and we have people from the US, people from United Arab Emirates, cardiologists and neurologists who wants to participate. So I think the best way to explain things is by doing it in front of people.
By showing.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing is believing, right? Whether
Exactly.
you're in the scientific field or you're in the entrepreneurship field, the proof is in the pudding.
Exactly.
Very cool. So you're going to kick off your first pilot project. You're going to see how it's going to work. And then from there, you can see how you can scale and learn, most importantly.
Absolutely.
Take all the feedback to have a better...
And adapt and evolve. Yes,
launch.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is amazing. It's the first time for me to actually fully get the picture of your project. Of course, I read a lot about the project, so I was interested to interview
There is nothing
you.
much about the project. I don't put a lot about the project online.
Yeah.
But
I've
written over 170 pages.
Of 170 pages of what exactly?
Of this project. Everything.
Of this project, just like the white paper,
everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Okay.
Models. I did a lot of models for this project, how it's going to grow, what's the directions, what's the worst case scenario, what's the best case scenario. I've been doing mathematical modeling for my entire career. So I just built some discrete math models and probability models and some stuff based on game theory. And I did a lot of predictions. I've written a lot of things about how the world is going to embrace this kind of... I have this imagination of a research team that is composed of 2 main computers and 12 humans. So this is a new unit for researchers, not just humans. So I think science will be fixed if we get machines and humans to work together in a very efficient way. And this way is only possible through blockchain. Without blockchain, it's going to be a mess.
So the ultimate aim of blockchain or Bitcoin, which was invented, is to create that that trust, right? Trust between in a trustless universe, right? You want to make sure. So this is the big thing that it solves for. So I know that there's a smart contract that is built into the system that is transparent, that I can see it. If I accomplish task A, I will get B, and I will get this much share. So everything is really nicely and neatly design. So, but then there's the other element, as you said, of transparency. There's the element of financial systems. Blockchain to me seems more and more it's going to be like the connecting glue between everything, right? Like it takes the place of the state effectively. If you want to be really an anarchist and look at it that way,
the network state.
Yeah, exactly. It takes the part of the state. You don't need to worry about enforcers in terms of the judiciary. You have the code does that. You don't have to worry about lawyers formulating contracts between people. Code does that. So it really removes executives from our lives and instead replaces it with code. And then the only way you can reap something out of this code is if either you provide value or you give value. You take value or you give value.
Yeah. And this actually has a direct impact on the shape of human communities as we know them today, because we are grouped in big cities and small cities based on the governance model of any nation. So when you have blockchain coming into human communities and human societies and taking over, as you said, so many roles from the government and from the system, from the state, you don't need to have these kind of massive and huge populations. So you get to have a better and more efficient way of building human communities that are more sustainable and less polluting to the environment, because you get to disperse the human communities on a much fairer and better area of land. And to be honest, I try all myself to be a positive person, try to see the positive future always. I think this generation has the opportunity to safeguard humanity until we reach this point, until we really fix what is wrong now. So I think at least we do have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And so what is wrong today? That's a good question as well.
Geography is wrong.
The geography is wrong.
Yeah, the geography is wrong.
What is it? The distribution of humans across the geography of Earth is wrong?
Not humans, the distribution of wealth.
The wealth. Okay.
Yeah. Because actually the post-World War II world and the Cold War world has built a global system that is it's very shameful when you have a blockchain to have this global system. It feels very shameful to see the blockchain technology and AI and computing achieves all this, and the world still maintaining to this kind of a nation-state model with the geopolitical potential models that are either polarized or demoted or controlled. So I think this is what's wrong now. I think what is wrong now is the current arrangement between wealth, governance, and talent pools and human resources.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely second you on the human resources aspect. Today, the world that we live in is based on a lottery of birth. You're born in the United States, for example, you get that blue passport. It gives you access to funding, education, opportunity, travel, etc. You're born, let's say, in Palestine with a document, not a passport. You are restricted from going virtually anywhere or getting any access to education or medical care even at points. So it seems very arbitrary, and it seems that we are losing. There's 8 billion people on this planet. Far majority of them live in impoverished societies with very limited options, and we're losing that human potential. That as you said, there could be the next Einstein, there could be the next Isaac Newton anywhere. And this is where I think it's really interesting, where you talk about blockchain and the ethos of blockchain. It's all about the true exchange of value, right? Of course, crypto market, I'm not going to get into that nightmare. But of course, there's a lot of shit coins, and there's a lot of fake projects and fraudulent projects that tarnish the name of the technology itself. But as we all know, and you as a scientist, technology could be used for good or could be used for bad. There are some bad actors in every space, in every field possible. But as you said, like, it's only the nerds that get it. Like when we dig deeper into how blockchain can govern.
I'm not really worried about what's happening in blockchain, because I always think 50 to 100 years ahead. I always think what will happen in 2070, what will happen in 2100. So blockchain is relatively very new as an infrastructure, as something that has its own DNA. So it's very natural that people would play with it in the wrong ways, in so many wrong ways. But we are still in the first, or even in the prehistoric age of blockchain now. So we are still in the prehistoric. I think in 5 years from now, kids will be able to set up applications on blockchain from smartphones. So I think we are in the prehistoric age of blockchain. So I'm not really worried when the FTX happened, when all these things happen. Yeah, people lose money in these platforms, so I don't put my money in. But I'm not worried. I don't think it's a problem. It's natural. We are changing human societies and human communities.
Exactly. I mean, same thing could be said about the beginning of the internet age. You got the .com boom, then you got the bust, and a lot of companies went bankrupt. There was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of hyper evaluations for companies. This is all part of the natural cycle. But this is where we're really right now at the cusp, I think, of something very exciting, because we are at the downturn, and I'm so happy the downturn has came. It has really shut down all shit projects out of the way. And now we really see the value, and we see the builders today. They're more in solidarity together in the space, the Web3 space, that we all really want to succeed as a group, not as individuals as well, because we do realize there's a paradigm shift, as you have stated so clearly, in the way that we perceive partnerships, in the way we perceive value that we can extract from the internet and from others, and how we can work as a community to build things. So in the branding world, in the business world, blockchain today is being viewed in a different way, because we're looking at something called consumer generated brands. Going forward, a brand will not own its insignia. It will not own its image. Who will own it is the rightful owners, the super fans, the guys who made the brand, the people that really rep a brand and make it so popular. These are the people that should have the control over it. And this is the shift that I think a lot of brands today, especially traditional old brands, are struggling to accept. It's that democratizing effect. It's going to come knocking. True digital ownership is going to start becoming a lot more expected from consumers, and they want to have a say. And this is where, when you talk about scientific BRP research, and suddenly for the first time, I've never heard of any normal individual like me investing in IP for future research in the medical field, but now that's a possibility. I can do that. I can contribute with my money into the future of scientific discovery.
I work as a mentor with the Newchip Accelerator in the US as a remote mentor. So I work with many startups in the medical technology space and the simulation and modeling technology space. So I've seen quite an impressive number of companies who are raising money for their new drugs. They are spin-offs, university spin-offs. So a professor with his students coming out to do some herbal medicine to replace another drug that has worse side effects and stuff. So I've seen a lot of companies like them. They are raising money with NFTs. So they take all the data that they have on this project with the future plan, and they put on the top of it an IP ownership agreement, a joint IP ownership agreement, and they set it up as an NFT with a smart contract. And they raise, a company raised, I think, $12 million to fund research in developing molecular-based drugs for neurodegenerative disease. So there are people raising money to develop drugs from cannabis, from botanical plants, from so many things. I'm not sure if it's right to say the names of the companies. But I'm working with a number of these companies, and I'm helping them with how to protect their IPs, how to devise their IP strategy, how to build a submarine pipeline and a patent pipeline in the right way for the investors to get the real value out of the token. Because you don't want to get a share in something that depends on another thing. So this is another challenge that we have to solve in blockchain, because we have to make a good seed, a good DNA for this NFT, because it has to grow in the right way. So investors should be able later on to use it as an asset to back startups, to back the new generation of startups. So let's say they own 10% in NFTs of a new drug, and then there is another company that is building a better drug. So he should be able to stake those NFTs somewhere and get some crypto or some fiat money and use it to go into this other venture, and then pay it off later on and release the NFTs and go back to the first project. So we need to build patents, because we are stuck with patents, unfortunately. We are just tokenizing their IP joint agreements, their joint IP agreements. So this is what we can do now. In the future, I believe that patent offices and regulatory bodies will have to develop their own blockchains. So applications like DeScience Fund and platforms like DeScience Fund and other projects will be able to connect and exchange records and double check. So this process will need to be automated very soon.
Well, it has been a really fascinating discussion, and I love hearing about the great things that you guys are building at DeScience Fund. Before we wrap up, so just to share with the audience here, where can they learn more about DeScience Fund, and what are the next steps for you guys?
Next steps is with zero code. So the next step is I mean, without zero code, our project would have never been possible because it would have taken a very long time and much more resources and that we don't currently have, to be honest. So zero code has given us, I mean, it's like an incubator. It's like it's something that we got in and you guys are doing everything for us in a marvelous way. I mean, the Wix move was awesome. I mean,
Thank you so much.
Wix is like a very nice thing to work with, and it's very pleasing. And you can actually, I work with Wix like in bed, you know. So it's really nice to work with. And having your platform embedded with Wix and built with the Wix features, this is awesome. So the next step is that we are going to launch an NFT collection, a Genesis NFT collection. We will offer it for sale to people who wants to be guardians, who wants to be co-founders, and it will offer ownership agreement in a portfolio of IPs that these people are going to build BRPs in the future. So it will offer them vaults, digital vaults, and places where they can grant minting power and win some tokens and so on and play this nice game. And then we are going to launch the first call for BRPs hopefully by June. And then we are going to operate this first stage for 18 months before launching our security token offering and starting the next stage, which will give much more people access to this platform and will give scientists in regions and countries that do not have sufficient funding access to get funded from more privileged countries.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I will plug as well the domain in the description, and I will add the links to it. I'm really glad you enjoyed working with Zero Code. I mean, again, this is part of our ethos. We want to make Web3 building easy and simple for everyone, as easy as designing, as you said, a Wix page.
And you know, the thing is, every time I tell someone in a meeting, in a virtual meeting or in a face-to-face meeting about Zero Code, and I show them the website and the kind of work that you guys are doing, I keep getting questions. So how much do they charge if I want to do this? How much do they charge if I want to do that? I have someone who wants to tokenize a real estate in Dubai. Can they do that? Can they do this?
Yeah,
so
they can.
So I think Zero Code, I think that the whole idea of Zero Code is exactly what you told me the first time we met. It's Shopify for Web3. So
exactly.
it's something that you can use as easy as Shopify, but you have a blockchain in the back end. So this is really awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm really glad you love it. And I'm glad you're getting a lot of people interested. And of course, if anyone is interested, reach out. So yeah, that's a good plugin. I didn't intend to plug in my product in this podcast, but thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. But very good discussions. And as well, everyone reach out to Khalid. And yeah, let's call it a wrap. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.